Welcome everybody, here's brother Juan Pablo Riberas.
I am brother Eugenio Rangel.
We are two brothers of the Legionaries of Christ in our second year of Humanities. And today we wanted to speak to you about the perspective, but more than the perspective, how the human heart reacts toward a greater good, a greater reality or a greater power. This we will be speaking through the lens of literature, of two of the most famous American writers of the 19th century. For me, I will be speaking about Mark Twain and his work of Joan of Arc.
I will speak about Herman Melville and his masterpiece Moby-Dick.
And throughout the video, the idea is to make a comparison between these two positions, whether both are American authors, how they contrast and how they exalt some values the one from the other. So let's start with Herman Melville's Moby-Dick.
We know that Moby-Dick is about the journey of the Pequod that is commanded by the Captain Ahab with the main objective of killing Moby-Dick, the white whale. But a question that I would like to ask you before starting this discussion is, which is the motivation that Ahab has to kill Moby-Dick? Which is that desire that Ahab has to go against the white whale? A plain answer to this question, it can be that Ahab, as Ismael said in chapter 41, he just want to kill the white whale because of the stroke that tore him, because the white whale take out his leg. But I will consider that answer as too shallow. And trying to go a little bit deeper in this reality, I agree with Ahab, as he said in chapter 36, that he wanted not to kill just the whale. He wanted to kill the mask that was behind that whale. And now I would like to state that that mask that was behind that whale, it was God's omnipotence. It was a force that was above him, that in my opinion was the force of God. In the first encounter that Ahab has with Moby-Dick, and Moby-Dick takes out his leg, Ahab not just experienced the loss of his leg. Ahab experienced that clash between his human impotence and the omnipotence of God, of something that was unstoppable and he couldn't beat so easily, or never beat, as we see in the book. Ahab, in that encounter, he experienced the total loss of his identity, or what he now knew and he stated and he defended that was his identity. Ahab passed from being a hunter to be hunted. Ahab experienced an authority of an force, a sublime force that was above him, and he rejected to follow that authority. We can see a contrast between Ahab and in Jonas. As Father Maple said in chapter 9 of Moby-Dick, in his sermon, we can see how Jonas also rebelled to God. He rebelled against his authority, and he experienced also a clash, an encounter, a personal experience of his human impotence and the omnipotence of God that was manifested, such as in the case of Ahab, behind the mask of a whale. But there is a difference between these two characters, and the difference is that Jonas accepted this experience, accepted his human impotence with humility, and Ahab, full of pride, he rejected. And Ahab didn't follow the advice that Father Maple tells us in the chapter 9, which is, if we obey God, we must disobey ourselves. And it is in disobeying ourselves wherein the hardness of obeying God consists. I will state that the way in which each character, after having that experience of that sublime force, of that sublime authority, that experience of God, it depends of the reaction and the free will of each character decision, that decision, that action determines the way and the fate and the destiny of each character. We see it in Jonas and we see it in Ahab.
Yeah. But we won't go much further because we invite you to continue reading the book and get to know how this story develops and also concludes. But it's really interesting what Brother Eugenio mentions regarding the position of being the hunter to being hunted. But now let's speak more about Joan of Arc. With this same idea on mind, let's start with a question. And it's a question that I make to you, but it's the question that everybody who stands in front of that girl made himself or herself. Who is that girl? Who is this girl? Who is Joan of Arc? First of all, having a little bit of context, we are in the 100 years war between England and France. Up to that point, France was being destroyed, already having Paris conquered by the English and the majority of the territory being conquered by the English. The king was not even a king, he was not yet crowned. The situation was really difficult in the French position. And here comes a 17 peasant girl, French girl, Joan of Arc, from a lost town called Domremy, north of France, border with Germany. And we ask ourselves, what does this girl has that pushes her, that moves her to go in front of kings, in front of armies, in front of every person that put it in front of her through her mission? What has moved this girl to don't be afraid and to go and try to fulfill her mission? In really simple terms, she always stayed, and Mark Twain through his book stated that the mission of Joan of Arc was to beat the siege of Orleans and also to crown the king, the future king, Charles VII. With this in mind, and through the whole book, there's this latent, whether you believe it or not, there's this latent presence of the figure of God, this power, this force, this person that through representatives called voices, that it's the Archangel Michael and some other saints, that push Joan of Arc repeatedly in her conscience to go and look forward for these two events to happen. This girl, let us take it back to the image. Who is this girl? Who's a 17-year-old girl in France? Peasant. Nobody. Whether we like it or not in our current age, in that moment she was a nobody. She had no worth, no authority, no power. But still, through the development of the history, an actual true history, or whether it's fictional the story, but still she was a historical character, we see that her motivation was not of being haunted by voices, but she was impelled by God, and that gave her a huge determination to go out and stand in front of kings and queens, of all an army, and against her enemies. It's quite interesting to see these both authors, Melville and Twain, to see the comparison, because behind the figure of Joan of Arc, we see somebody that is not pursuing a dream of her own, but she has a sense of mission that again impels her to do all the things that nobody thought that she could do. We see her defeating the English in a process of 7 days, although it took her longer to convince all these people. But all these people at the end, whether accepting or not that God was behind her, they saw something that changed their hearts. And they saw a determined girl that was able to do what no man in France could do in that moment. So this thing of seeing how this girl was motivated by a bigger figure, and that we can call, she was moved by God, She conquered and she did all the things that the French army couldn't do in 75 years of the war. And it's amazing to see how this determination, both in Captain Ahab and in Joan of Arc, are really similar, because both they have a straight point where they wanted to go and they wanted to conquer, but the development and the conclusion of both is very different, although in the same way very tragic. We won't give you more details about how both works end, but still bring up to mind how these American authors see or portray the ideal of what should be the position of a man towards God, and also how he ends up regarding the decisions both characters made. But well, let's go further and in this kind of dialogue and presentation. I'm really interested of all what we listened of Captain Ahab. What can you say that is a virtue or a value that we can try to imitate were the results of the work?
Well, I think a very important value that we found in Captain Ahab, and then also is reflected in the old identity of United States, because as you know, Moby-Dick of Herman Melville masterpiece is a piece that gave an identity to US. So one strength that I find really interesting in Ahab is his, as he say of Joan of Arc, is that determination, that courage, and that desire of conquering always, of going forward or going forward always, beyond his forces, beyond his own strengths, beyond his limitations. That reality of trying always to go further. So I found it very interesting, very admirable, and yeah, I think that is gonna be the virtue of Ahab that I admire the most. And you of Joan of Arc?
Well, we already mentioned the determination, but still here I want to emphasize the humility and the certainty of what was she doing. The humility, first of all, because we see a girl that she knows her reality. She knows she's a peasant girl from a lost town in France. She knew herself, but still she trusted more in this force in God that was going to give her the strength to fulfill her whole mission. And also this humility, not only of accepting herself as she was, but also the humility to face these authorities with peace. It's a humility of saying, I know who I am, and I know who sent me, and I will do what I'm asked to do. It's this humility of the one that just accepts reality and embraces it, and also is determined to go after her mission. So this humility that also was one of the factors that at the end make all the people that she faced maybe not to believe all what she was saying, but to admire and to question themselves. How is she doing? So she's not pretending to be something she's not. She's not claiming to be nothing more than what she is. And still there's truth behind her message. So the power of the virtue of humility in a person, it can be really striking, because humility sometimes is seen as a virtue that it doesn't try to conquer in a way, but humility ends up being a conquering virtue, and not through arms and power and authority, but through accepting the truth and fighting for that truth. But well, we really hope that you have a really helpful insight in these two works, literature works, and we really invite you to keep your journey in the reading of these classics, and we'll keep tuned in our program here in LC Cheshire. We thank you, and anything that you want to add?
Oh, thank you. Just also give you thanks for your moments. Also, give us your like, share this video with all your friends, activate the notifications, and well, see you later.
Yeah, go deep in your readings. You will enjoy it. Thank you.